there's a lot of lift that you do when you run a rehearsal room or a classroom too, where you kind of like try to wrap your spiritual arms around everybody in the room, or even just give a talk, right? You try to like uh, sense everybody in the room and take them somewhere with you. And you can't do that here because there's no feedback loop. So really it's kind of like, I hope the semiotics of this break down in such a way that it transmits to them so that they get some inkling of what I'm trying to convey. And I feel that way about the audience too, right? So when you make a show for a live audience, the performers and the artists involved can actually wrap their arms around the audience space. And you're sort of like transmitting into the void, hoping that this radio signal gets received. Or that you've like, you've solved the problems, and it's a little more mathematical in some ways, that you're working to kind of solve problems, make meaning with the tools of visual and audio stuff, but you're not doing a very subtle, very hard to describe thing of using interpersonal tools to make meaning, which one does in live performance. Like dance is a great example of that, right? So watching a dance on video versus watching a dance live just feels different, because you're like breathing the same air. You're some kind of there's some like transmission of rhythm that's different. And of course, Zoom messes with rhythm anyway, and film, can robotically, magically change rhythm. So that feels really different.
I'm questioning a lot of the push through. Like when do we? How do we? If like I feel like before this moment I had a much better sense of that, and it's all like it's totally messed up in Zoom land. I can't read people. I can't feel. Like we're empaths. Like I can't feel anybody. And so there's a lot of like looking, reading, and all of that, and it's not quite working. So it actually has opened up trying to figure out how how to communicate around needs has changed for me a bunch, and like making a lot of space for that, trying to figure out how to set up tools around that beyond just a check-in, kind of like even the offer, even the one of the tools is like being kind of reiterating over and over in a process of like, if you need anything, reach out. Like if you need anything, reach out. If you need anything, just like keep reiterating that and keep asking the question, so that we know as the background there's always space to communicate needs, because they're so hard to read and talk about in this space. I thought of my work often as like it needed suffering in order to happen, and I was like, I gotta like, so art is suffering. I gotta like work really hard, and the like process needs to be hard. We're gonna push, and something had switched over the last couple of years, and that had coincided with the pandemic, where all of a sudden I was like, what if processes were it feels revolutionary in my system, but I'm sure it's not, which is what if processes were nourishing to the artists inside of them. And so that coincided with a time where like, since there is no known performance date, we could just focus on nourishment in this setting. And so there's like a conversation that my group of artists were having around like, well, what does nourishment mean? What does that look like? How do we like take breaks? How do we like not talk over each other in a weird way? Like Zoom removes all natural conversation flow, as it's doing right now. That like that it's that you lose all of those textures of people being in a room together and communicating together, and like picking up all sorts of other nonverbal signals. And so we kind of need to slow everything down and a little bit build back from scratch.
Well, I think for me, the thing that's been most helpful actually is to think about reframing what the idea of working even means, right? And I think that, in the theater world, we talk about, oh, that works, that work. We're in rehearsal, that's working, that's really working. Ah, it's not really working so much. Let's try something different, right? And so that word working has kind of accrued this sort of, it's like theater jargon. It like means all this stuff, right? And I just feel like just reframing what working even means right now is super important. And I think that we're trying to, I think I think we're actually starting to move away from this now, like 1 year into the pandemic. But I think the initial impulse from a lot of theater artists was to try to like try to bend Zoom and bend digital media to theater, and sort of like take all of theater's stuff, like all our, the things that we use to make theater, and just like put it on top of digital media. And I think it's like just releasing ourselves from that pressure is super important. And there are no experts now. Like that's the thing that's been so exciting, really, like working on Theater of All Possibilities as an ensemble with the students. Like I would say, like that project, more than any project I've worked on with students, I felt like a peer, like a colleague with them, because it's new for all of us, right? And that there were no experts. I mean, there's a little bit of a hierarchical structure because they're teachers and students or whatever, but as artists making the thing, it was just like, I mean, so the work that the students would come back with, like with their expertise in TikTok and video editing and YouTube, and it's just like, it was so exciting.